Hi there, explorers of the edible. Welcome back to the Vibrant Health Project, where we unravel the science behind a healthier, more vibrant you. Today, we're tackling a topic that's as tiny as it is concerning microplastics in our food. Now you might be thinking, microplastics? In my food? What's the big deal? Well, stick with me, because these minuscule plastic particles, often invisible to the naked eye, are making their way into our food chain and, ultimately, our bodies. We're talking about fragments of plastic smaller than 5 millimeters, originating from larger plastic products that break down over time. These tiny troublemakers can come from various sources, including the breakdown of larger plastic debris, synthetic fibers from clothing, and even microbeads found in some personal care products. Over the next few chapters, we'll delve into the potential health risks associated with microplastic consumption, and most importantly, unveil the top 10 foods where these microscopic intruders are most likely to be lurking. Get ready for a fascinating, albeit slightly unsettling journey into the world of microplastics. Let's dive right in, shall we? Today, we're embarking on a journey beneath the waves to uncover a hidden menace lurking in our oceans. Our first stop takes us beneath the waves to a staple in many diets around the world, seafood. From the bustling fish markets to the serene underwater habitats, seafood is a crucial part of our lives. You see, fish, especially those swimming in polluted waters, often become unwilling hosts to microplastics. These tiny plastic particles, often invisible to the naked eye, infiltrate their bodies. How does this happen? Well, imagine a fish mistaking a tiny piece of plastic for a tasty morsel of food. It's a simple yet tragic case of mistaken identity. Unfortunately, this case of mistaken identity is all too common. Fish can ingest microplastics directly from their environment, mistaking them for food. But that's not the only way these plastics make their way into fish. Fish can also consume microplastics through the consumption of smaller organisms that have already gobbled up these plastic particles. It's a chain reaction that affects the entire marine ecosystem, and it's not just the fish themselves that pose a concern. When we prepare and eat these fish, we too are at risk of ingesting microplastics. Think about the bigger fish in the sea, literally. These larger predatory fish consume smaller fish, accumulating microplastics as they move up the food chain. Larger predatory fish, the ones we often find on our dinner plates, consume smaller fish, accumulating microplastics as they move up the food chain. This means that the fish we eat are likely to contain higher concentrations of these harmful particles. This process, known as biomagnification, means that the higher up the food chain you go, the greater the concentration of microplastics you're likely to encounter. It's a sobering thought, especially for seafood lovers. So, the next time you're craving a delicious tuna steak or a plate of fish and chips, remember that there might be more on your plate than meets the eye. These microplastics can have serious health implications for us as well. Stay tuned as we explore the world of shellfish and their own microplastic predicament. The journey into the depths of our oceans and the impact of microplastics is far from over. Alright, science fans, let's move from the sea to your spice rack because, believe it or not, even something as simple as salt isn't safe from the pervasive reach of microplastics. Yes, you heard that right. The very salt you use to season your food, enhance flavors, and even preserve your favorite dishes might be carrying tiny hitchhikers that you never bargained for. That's right, we're talking about salt, specifically sea salt, the kind often touted for its mineral content and flavor. Sea salt is often preferred over table salt for its natural harvesting process and the trace minerals it contains, which are believed to offer health benefits. You see, sea salt is produced by evaporating seawater, leaving behind those precious salt crystals we sprinkle on our food. This process, while natural and ancient, is not foolproof in today's world where our oceans are increasingly polluted. But here's the catch. If the seawater used for salt production is contaminated with microplastics, guess what? Those tiny plastic particles can end up hitching a ride right into our salt shakers. These microplastics are often invisible to the naked eye, making it hard to detect their presence. It's a classic case of you are what you eat, or in this case, you are what you season your food with. Every time you sprinkle that sea salt on your meal, you might be adding a pinch of plastic along with it. And while the thought of ingesting microplastics with every sprinkle of salt might make you want to swear off seasoning altogether, don't despair just yet. There are steps you can take to reduce your exposure to these contaminants. There are ways to minimize your risk, and we'll explore those options later on. From choosing salts that are tested for purity to being mindful of the sources of your sea salt, there are practical steps you can take. But first, let's delve a bit deeper into the world of salt production and understand how those pesky microplastics find their way into this kitchen staple. By understanding the journey from seawater to salt shaker, we can better appreciate the complexities and challenges of keeping our food supply clean and safe. Honey, that golden nectar that sweetens our lives, might be hiding a not-so-sweet secret. We're talking about microplastics, those tiny pieces of plastic that are everywhere these days. You see, bees are amazing creatures. They fly around collecting pollen and nectar from flowers to make honey, but what happens when those flowers are surrounded by plastic pollution? Unfortunately, those tiny plastic particles can end up in the pollen and nectar. And when the bees bring those ingredients back to the hive, guess what? The microplastics can end up in our honey. Now I know what you're thinking. Bill, are you telling me my honey is full of plastic? Sugar. The sweet stuff that gives us energy and makes our taste buds sing. But did you know that even sugar isn't immune to the scourge of microplastics? That's right, those tiny plastic particles have a way of sneaking into just about everything. Now you might be thinking, Bill, how on earth does plastic get into my sugar? Well, it can happen at different stages along the way, from the sugarcane fields to the processing plants. Sometimes microplastics can find their way into the soil where the sugarcane grows. This can happen through the breakdown of larger plastic debris, or even from the use of sewage sludge as fertilizer. And once those microplastics are in the soil, they can be absorbed by the plants, including sugarcane. So even before the sugarcane is harvested, it may already contain some unwanted plastic passengers. Ah, beer, the golden nectar that has been a staple of human civilization for thousands of years. The beloved beverage enjoyed by millions around the world, bringing people together in celebration and camaraderie. But even this refreshing drink isn't safe from the pervasive threat of microplastics, those tiny plastic particles that have infiltrated nearly every corner of our environment. You see, the journey from barley to beer is a complex one, with many steps along the way, each presenting its own challenges and opportunities for contamination. And unfortunately, each step presents an opportunity for those pesky plastic particles to sneak in, starting right from the fields where the barley is grown. It all starts with the barley, the main ingredient in beer. This hardy grain is cultivated in vast fields, soaking up nutrients from the soil. Now, barley is a resilient crop, but it's not immune to absorbing microplastics from the environment, especially if it's grown in soil contaminated with plastic debris. These tiny plastic particles can come from a variety of sources, including degraded plastic waste that has found its way into agricultural lands. And as we learned earlier, microplastics can lurk in water sources too, further complicating the issue. Since water is a key ingredient in beer production, there's another chance for contamination right there. Water used in brewing can carry microplastics from rivers, lakes, and even groundwater. Now let's head to the brewery, where the magic happens. This is where the barley and water come together to create the beer we love. Beer brewing involves a lot of equipment, from mash tuns and lauter tuns to fermentation tanks and filtration systems. These pieces of equipment are essential for converting barley into the delicious beverage we enjoy. Fermentation tanks allow the yeast to work its magic, turning sugars into alcohol, while filtration systems ensure the beer is clear and free of unwanted particles. While these systems are designed for sanitation and efficiency, many of them contain plastic components that can degrade over time. These plastic parts, when worn down, can release microplastics into the beer during the brewing process. Over time, these components can wear down, releasing microplastics into the beer, adding yet another layer of contamination. These microplastics can end up in the final product, making their way into the beer that eventually reaches our glasses. And then there's the bottling process. This is the final step before the beer is shipped out to consumers. Many beers are packaged in plastic bottles, which, as we've seen before, can leach microplastics into the liquid inside, especially if exposed to heat or sunlight. The heat and sunlight can cause the plastic to break down, releasing even more microplastics into the beer. This means that by the time the beer reaches you, it may already be contaminated with microplastics from multiple sources. So, from the barley fields to the brewing process to the final product, microplastics have plenty of opportunities to make their way into our beloved beer. It's a sobering thought, but one that highlights the pervasive nature of plastic pollution and its impact on even the most cherished aspects of our lives. Now, we all know that staying hydrated is important, and many folks reach for a bottle of water when they're thirsty, but did you know that your convenient bottle of H2O might also contain a hidden ingredient, microplastics? It's true! You see, plastic bottles themselves can be a source of these tiny plastic particles. Over time, the plastic can break down, shedding microscopic bits and pieces into the water inside. This process can be accelerated by heat, so leaving your bottled water in a hot car or exposed to direct sunlight for long periods can make things worse. And it's not just the bottle itself. Think about all the different points in the bottled water's journey from the factory to your hands. There's the manufacturing process, the packaging, the transportation, and even the storage at the store. At any of these stages, there's potential for microplastic contamination. So, that seemingly pristine bottle of water might be harboring more than you bargained for. Rice! It's a staple food for billions of people around the world, a blank canvas for countless culinary creations. But here's a sobering thought. Even this humble grain isn't immune to the pervasive problem of microplastic pollution. How do these tiny particles end up in our rice bowls, you ask? Well, it all starts with the environment. Rice paddies, those flooded fields where rice grows, often rely on irrigation water that can be contaminated with microplastics. These tiny plastic fragments can originate from various sources such as agricultural runoff, industrial discharge, or even the breakdown of larger plastic debris in the environment. As the rice plants grow, they absorb water and nutrients from their surroundings, and unfortunately, that can include microplastics. These particles can become lodged within the plant's tissues, making their way into the rice grains themselves. This means that when we consume rice, we might unknowingly be ingesting these tiny plastic intruders as well. We all know that fruits and vegetables are essential for a healthy diet, packed with vitamins, minerals, and fiber. But did you know that even these nutritional powerhouses aren't safe from microplastic contamination? It's true. Fruits and veggies, those champions of a balanced diet, can unfortunately absorb microplastics from their environment. Think about it. They grow in soil and rely on water for nourishment, both of which can be contaminated with these tiny plastic particles. Imagine a farmer irrigating their crops with water from a nearby river. If that river happens to be polluted with microplastics, those tiny particles can seep into the soil and be absorbed by the plants through their roots. It's like accidentally sipping from a contaminated water fountain, except for plants. We've all heard the saying, bread is the staff of life. But what happens when that staff is peppered with tiny bits of plastic? That's right, friends. Even our beloved bread isn't immune to the pervasive problem of microplastics. Think about the journey bread takes from grain to loaf. Flour, the main ingredient, can become contaminated with microplastics during processing and packaging. And let's not forget about the equipment used in large-scale baking, those industrial mixers and conveyors. They can shed microplastics too. Now, before you swear off baguettes and bagels forever, remember that the levels of microplastics found in bread are generally low. Milk, cheese, yogurt, dairy products are staples in many of our diets. But just like those tasty baked goods, dairy can also be a source of unwanted microplastics. How do these tiny particles end up in our milk jugs and cheese slices? Well, it's a bit of a domino effect. It starts on the farm. Cows and other dairy animals often eat feed that's been stored in plastic containers or wrapped in plastic film. Microplastics can then make their way into the animals' digestive systems and eventually into their milk. But it's not just the feed. Water sources on farms can be contaminated with microplastics, which the animals then ingest. And let's not forget about the plastic equipment used in the milking and processing of dairy products, all potential sources of microplastic contamination. So, the next time you're reaching for a cold glass of milk or a grilled cheese sandwich, take a moment to think about the journey those dairy products took to get to your plate. Well, there you have it, folks. 10 common foods that might just have more microplastics lurking within than you realized. From seafood and salt to bread and dairy, these tiny particles have permeated our food system in ways we're only just beginning to understand. But remember, knowledge is power. By being aware of the sources of microplastic contamination, we can make informed choices about the foods we eat and reduce our exposure to these potentially harmful particles. Choose unpackaged options whenever possible, support businesses that prioritize sustainability, and always remember to reduce, reuse, and recycle. If you found this information helpful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more insights on maintaining a healthy lifestyle. And remember, stay curious. The more we learn about the world around us, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves and our planet.